Still working on these smaller flower pieces. I have the Imprimatura down for about 5 of them, 5 or 6. And generally, I try to work these things up in groups because I find it, for a series, it's easiest to work everything up at the same time. So whatever stage I'm at, I'll do all of them and then move on to the next stage on all of them, and that gives ample drying time in between. One pass on each picture is pretty quick, and so I can move through them all in a relatively short amount of time, and that's kind of what I'm after right now. I have the Imprimatura down, like I said. I'm going to go in with some white acrylic and work up some of the lighter shapes. I would probably start with this little guy here and move on to the next ones after that. Just to give a quick example of what I've been doing. There's this one. Here's another one that I'm working on at the same level. One more. And a couple of larger ones. For example, this one here. And so, point being that when I work them up in groups, then at each stage I have 5, 6 pieces that are all at about the same level of completion. Doing the Imprimatura with acrylic because of drying time, because of habit. This is sort of the method I've been working with for a little while. I learned with using egg tempera and oil, and that's also a really good method. Because these are smaller studies, then I don't mind the acrylic. If I'm doing a more finished portrait or commission work, then usually I'm just using oil and egg tempera. But the nature of these is a little bit different, and so I'm more after the study than anything else. So here we go with some white. And at this point I'm going to switch to a little bit smaller brush. Because some of the details that I'm trying to get, or some of the shapes that I'm trying to get, are going to be a little bit smaller, a little bit tougher to hit with the bigger brush. And we'll see how far we can get with the bigger brush for the moment. So once again, number 20, flat brush. And this paint, by the way, is a little bit watered down. I don't want to go in with completely thick, pure white, because at every stage I'm trying to retain a little bit of whatever's coming through from underneath. I think one of the benefits of the age that we're living in now is that painting has become an almost generalized practice where we're drawing in elements of surrealism, impressionism, classical painting, so many different movements throughout history that we can draw on, that we can access, that we can be inspired by, graphic design even. And we're able to leverage all of these different styles, all these different approaches to painting in our work to come up with a hybrid painting technique that really pays homage to everything that's happened up until this point. Elements of abstraction, elements of hyperrealism. It's all available. We can use anything we want to get to a final product that really fits our own personal aesthetic. And like I've mentioned before, there's a lot of impasto painters that you're going to find on the internet who really do such an incredible job. My approach is probably a little bit different because I'm less of an impasto painter, more of a glazing and layers painter. And as you can already see here with the brush strokes, maybe it's coming in the camera, I'm not sure. Areas like this where it's getting streaky because of the brush, the hairs of the brush, is actually something that I'm using to begin to indicate the details of the flower petals. Sort of happens naturally. Here I'm following the form. Areas like this, following the form. That could probably be a little bit better. So following the form, or alternatively using those brush strokes to get that texture. I suppose in both cases we're able to use that to begin to get that texture. Some of these areas of deeper shadow will probably be addressed later on in the process. Right now I just want to get the highlight blocks more than anything else. Using a big brush like this for this part has the advantage of not allowing me to become too lost in the small stuff. I'll hit as much as I can with the corners, but for the most part, I'm trying to really use it in a broader manner. Where it's not perfect will be cleaned up in subsequent layers, especially when we start switching over to the oils. So So, I do want to accentuate a little bit more of the sharper highlights, and so I'm going to have to move to a little bit smaller brush here. This one is great for those broader shapes, but there does come a point where we need to move on to the smaller stuff. For me. And of course, how detailed you go, how accurate you want to be, is all a matter of preference. If it's really just purely about the paint and about the shapes and colors, then that can be some amazing, beautiful work. I tend to like hyperrealism and surrealism. And so that's usually more the direction that I like to take things, even if I do leave it at the end a little bit looser and painterly. That's always kind of at the forefront of my thinking, is ultimately getting that more photographic, tighter type of work. I was trained as an illustrator, and so I do love the tighter illustration work. Still mainly working with larger shapes here though, because ultimately everything is contingent on having logical shapes that work. Even if you look at somebody like Frank Frazetta, who gets relatively tight and realistic, but ultimately he was working primarily with broader shapes. It was shape design with enough environmental naturalism and accurate anatomy and figure painting, immaculate figure painting in fact, that he was able to maintain such a loose style while also achieving a relatively realistic look, or sometimes very realistic look. And it could be argued that that's the way that our eye sees, is more in this impressionistic way, where we're picking up light, play, values, and a broader array of colors rather than objects. If we were in some type of an alien world physics, where we didn't recognize objects as such, maybe like a newborn baby, then basically what we're picking up is that interplay of light and dark, interplay of colors, and things like that, rather than a chair, a door, a person, whatever it might be. And so we're trying to find maybe that middle ground where we're able to leverage both. No matter what the philosophy is, it's all a bit of a game. It's all for the sake of the exploration, having fun with it, enjoying the process, enjoying paint, appreciating all the different types of artists that are out there. Being able to find something of beauty from all of them. And getting a sense of of each individual's preferences and thinking. One of the funny things that happens, or interesting things that happens, is that what begins as indication for later stages of the process, hints and reminders and things like that, slowly start to become the process itself. I'm not quite sure where that transition happens or where that shift happens, but as you're working, you start to feel that moment happen where you're thinking, okay, this is just an indication for what's to come later. And then all of a sudden you realize that it's probably not just an indication anymore. And one of the benefits of still using the water is that if there's something that we don't like, it's pretty easy to come back in and fix it. That's why I never became a tattoo artist. I know myself too well. Even though I have lots of tattoos. And I do love the art form of tattooing, I know that my painting process tends to be a little more of a search, a little more chaotic, maybe messy even. And nobody's gonna let you go through that sort of searching process on their skin. Oh, maybe some people would. But it's definitely not ideal. And now we're starting to get into some of these real tight, small areas where start building up this complexity in here. Which, like I said before, if I was only working with shapes, I wouldn't allow myself to get too lost in this stuff. But the photorealistic side says accuracy, get everything in there and play with all those little things. And I'm gonna do my best to find that balance. So there's that. And we have this other little petal coming up through here. Some real beautiful white shimmers. And a nice sort of broad piece coming down over here. And one of the reasons I like doing flowers and stuff like this so much, and landscapes, portraits, figures, all the stuff, is that you're constantly having to refresh your inventory of color combinations, nuances, nuance of form, delicacy of the flower, the accuracy of the human anatomy, whatever it might be. There's definitely a lot to be learned. And so many beautiful things in the world to paint. So many ideas on a constant basis. And so, yeah, part of the reason I look at these as studies is because I know that a lot of what I'm working through in these is building up that subconscious database for when it comes to the surrealistic work. And these leaves at the bottom should only just be indications. It's going to get lost in the haze before too long. But I want to have enough there so that when those background layers start to get put in, that there's enough contrast back here that you're still going to be able to see these leaves, and try to push them to the point of almost being completely lost at some point, but that should be underneath multiple layers of paint, and not something that should be so transparent and so vague at this point that after one or two glazes that it gets completely lost. Just a little bit of stuff in there. This bad boy comes deep, pretty deep back in that crevice. There's some action here. Another thing I like about these is that you have these moments where it's like painting cloth. Just the way these petals wave and twist and form, or twist and turn, is sometimes just incredible. I'm trying to catch those nuances of this subtle waving flag type of form. Trying to get some of that stuff in there, trying to really study those movements of the natural forms. This part is a little bit tricky because what I'm painting now, this little white area, is actually the reflected light in that shadow there. And so I want to make sure that that reads as a reflected light in the shadow rather than as a and this here is getting direct light. This is that folding over of this bottom petal. So I want to get that brighter than this reflected light in here. This is reflected light in the shadow as well on that next petal back. So one petal, two petal. And it just folds over like this, but also has that little bit of reflected light in the shadow there. So this is what we're after. Again, this is reflected light in the shadow, reflected light in the shadow there as well. So I just want to get a little of that. And of course, this petal coming in from underneath, this petal coming in from underneath, where it meets this one from the other flower. This is also fun, as getting these very subtle shifts of light of this petal from this flower and this petal coming up from behind it from this one. But they're both receiving that same light, and they're both in the same shadow here that's being cast by this petal right there. So this is casting light against this whole area. Just awesome. This is in shadow, but it's catching a little bit of light right there. Everything that we paint, we learn something to take to our other work. I think at my age, you've worked in so many different styles and genres that style and genre begin to disappear. It's just painting pictures. And I really want this petal here, sneaking in from behind. It's got a little bit of an edge right there. That's pretty good. Things get more and more difficult. To follow the reference too close. And at the end of the day, nobody that's looking at the painting is comparing it to the reference to see if you got it right. And so, where there's a little bit of nuance, then that's part of the painting process. There we go. Yeah, that's about what I want. Great. So thank you for joining me for our little painting session here. I'm going to keep on going with some of these other pieces. Same process, get that white in there. And start thinking about adding some oil glazing. I'll definitely do another video when I start the oil process. This needs to dry up. Get some of these other little guys moving along to the same stage. This one's probably next. And like I said, it's possible that I'll be moving through different pieces as I make these videos, not necessarily just going to be one piece or the other from start to finish, because I am working them all up in groups in small series. It's 5 or 6 pieces. It's a small series. I would say a good size series for an exhibition at the size of galleries that I show at. It's probably about 12 to 15. In a bigger gallery, somebody would be making a series with 20 pieces, 25 pieces. So this is definitely just a small little series of studies. Little inconsistencies in the canvas don't bother me too much. Most of that's going to get covered over with so many layers of paint at the end that it just sort of becomes part of the overall texture. So, have a good day. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.